who apologized even when she wasn't at fault. To the customers who came in for their morning coffee, she was the sweet waitress who remembered their orders, asked about their families, and offered tired smiles that still felt warm. But behind the counter, her manager saw her differently, someone too meek to push back, too desperate for the paycheck to risk losing it. He had used that against her more times than she could count. The morning had begun in its usual rhythm. The smell of toasted bread, the rising steam from fresh coffee, the chatter of regulars discussing the weather or the latest town rumor. But beneath the surface, tension had been building like a storm no one noticed until it was too late. Mark Ellison had been more irritable than usual, snapping at workers, slamming cups onto counters, and throwing snide comments as though they were part of the menu specials. Alyssa had been carrying a tray of drinks when it happened. One wrong step, a bump from a passing customer, and a few drops of coffee splattered onto Mark's pressed white shirt. The diner froze instantly. Mark's expression darkened, and for a heartbeat, Alyssa felt the world stop breathing. Bathroom, now? He growled. Her co-workers looked at her with sympathy, but fear kept them rooted in place. She followed Mark down the narrow hallway, each of his heavy steps making her chest tighten. As soon as the bathroom door shut behind them, the explosion came. He shouted insults, his voice bouncing off the tiles, each word cutting sharper than the last. He called her clumsy, useless, stupid. When she stammered an apology, his hand shot forward, grabbing her collar and slamming her lightly but firmly against the cold wall. She gasped, shocked more by the suddenness than the force. Her heart raced. Fear climbed her throat. But even in that moment, her thoughts drifted to Evan, her husband, her anchor. He had always told her that kindness wasn't weakness, that her softness was a strength. She had clung to that during the years he was deployed with the Navy SEALs. Writing letters late into the night and working double shifts to keep their small apartment afloat, she whispered his name in her mind like a prayer. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Evan was already inside the diner. He had returned home earlier than expected, dressed simply, wanting to surprise her. He had imagined her eyes widening, her hands flying to her mouth in shock before she ran into his arms. Instead, as he waited near the counter, he saw Mark grab her by the arm, dragging her toward the back hallway. Even from a distance, Evan recognized fear. He had seen it too many times in war zones, in civilians caught in danger, in soldiers under pressure, and he saw it clearly in his wife's eyes. His pulse shifted. The instincts he had trained for years sharpened instantly. He moved quietly, following the two of them without drawing attention. When he reached the hallway and heard the shouting from behind the restroom door, his stomach twisted. Then he heard her gasp. He didn't wait another second. Inside, Mark's fury grew louder. You think your little smile matters? You're lucky to have this job. His grip tightened, and Alyssa sucked in a shaky breath, trying not to cry. She didn't scream, didn't shout. She simply fought to breathe. Then the door creaked open. The sound might have been small, but in that moment, it cut the air like thunder. Mark spun around, ready to lash out again until he saw Evan standing there. Evan's expression was calm. To calm his eyes, however, were storms barely contained. For a heartbeat. No one moved. Then Evan stepped forward. Mark backed up instinctively, words tumbling from his mouth, excuses, stutters, lies, but Evan didn't acknowledge them. Instead, he brushed past him as though Mark were nothing more than background noise, and gently reached for Alyssa. His hand slid into hers, grounding her instantly. You okay? He murmured, voice soft enough that only she could hear. Alyssa nodded, though tears still clung to her lashes. Only then did Evan turn to Mark. His voice was steady, controlled, deadly in its calmness. You will never speak to her again. You will never touch her again. Do you understand? Mark swallowed hard, nodding quickly. For the first time, he looked small, stripped of power, stripped of arrogance. Even the security guard outside, who had witnessed the scene, didn't step in. He simply watched, recognizing the truth. This wasn't violence. This was protection long overdue. When Alyssa and Evan stepped out of the bathroom, the entire diner fell silent. Customers watched, workers stared, everyone understanding something had happened, even if they didn't know the details. Alyssa, still shaken, held onto Evan's arm as though afraid he might vanish again. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She felt protected. She felt loved. That evening, as they curled together on their worn-out couch, Alyssa whispered, I thought I lost myself. Evan kissed her forehead, speaking softly. You never lost yourself. You just forgot how strong you are. The next day, word spread fast. Mark was fired by the diner's owner, who also apologized to Alyssa and offered her a better position. But the real turning point came months later when she opened her own cafe, Second Chance Diner. A place built not from bitterness, but from healing. She filled it with warm lights, soft music, and staff who were treated like family. Customers came not just for the food, but because they felt something, their kindness, safety, sincerity. Alyssa never forgot what it felt like to have her smile taken from her, and she made sure no one who entered her doors ever felt that way again. Sometimes courage doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers, "This ends today." And in that small diner bathroom, courage found Alyssa again and never left.